What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I am Phillip Jordan from Western College Football and 96.9 The Legend, Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Woods Football. Got a jam-packed show for you guys today. A lot of college football goodness. Busy last couple of days in college football. We'll give my thoughts on the college football playoffs being set. Coach Max Howell will join the show, get his big takeaways from championship weekend in college football. We'll break down the SEC championship game and get his thoughts on the four teams that will be playing in the playoff. Of course, it is Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. Then I'll talk about the transfer portal. That thing is open. A whole bunch of stuff there. A lot of big names. Look at some of the quarterbacks that are in the portal currently as we're recording this episode of the show. And we got some news on some players heading to the National Football League and much more. And your thoughts from last week on social media on Hugh Freeze being the new Auburn head football coach. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Show over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of this show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube. You go to the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read that on a future edition of the show. You can follow me over on social media at pjordansec, and you can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. The college football playoffs are set. And we know the four teams. It will be Georgia playing Ohio State, and it will be TCU playing Michigan in the college football playoff. And going into this past weekend, you kind of looked at it. Okay, you looked at Georgia and you looked at Michigan, and I just went in and penciled those two teams winning their conference championship games. Georgia took care of business against LSU. I will say this: LSU had some opportunities, I think, early on in that game. I think Jaden Daniels actually played pretty well throwing the ball, particularly early in the game. He was 16 of 24 for 208 yards, one touchdown. He did throw one interception, that crazy deflection off the helmet of the LSU receiver, then deflection again by Georgia defender, then Georgia defender took that one in, for the interception, which that did set up a touchdown for Georgia. But Jaden Daniels played well in that one. Garrett Nussmeier, they threw for 502 yards. But I just went in that one. I just didn't think LSU was going to be able to stop Georgia's offense. But didn't. Georgia scored 50 points. And early on, just some things went against LSU. And just, obviously, the game was never in doubt. Georgia came on to win there. And then Michigan, of course, beating Purdue in their game. I just say this, Purdue, you have to go for some fourth downs here. Kicking the field goals, that just was not going to work out for you in that one. So you looked at that. They did what they had to do. Those two teams, I figured that's how those games would go. We wouldn't really be in doubt with those games. But then when I looked at the TCU-Kansas State game, and I talked about this with Matt last week, I really felt like that was a game that TCU could lose. Now, I did pick TCU to win the game in a close one. I almost did a loss in overtime. But that really put them in a good position as well. Now, I was kind of wondering, since they lost, would they drop down to 4, and maybe Ohio State would jump into that 3 spot, but they keep TCU where they're at. But, I think what helps TCU in this situation, because they can still come out and say, we beat every team we played, because they did. Now, they went 1-1 with Kansas State, but remember, they beat them in the regular season 38-28. So it does help the resume. Then you lose in overtime the way they did. Max Duggan, incredible player, gut all the way. I mean, he really willed that team to overtime. I didn't necessarily like the play calling there by Sonny Dykes in overtime, going for the run plays. If anything, I would have taken Max Duggan and roll him out, giving him a pass run option there. But also, I kind of wonder, because you look at that overtime, TCU really did not try to throw the ball. So I wonder if there was really some issues going on there with Max Duggan. A good friend of the show, John Vogel, he put on Twitter that he thought maybe Duggan had a rib injury there, because he's really lucky. He was really gasping for air. He was thinking maybe that was more than just winded from being dehydrated or exhausted or whatever. It was more than that. But very interesting how that went down. But still, TCU Maybe Sunday Night thought he's playing with house money because the previous night, obviously, USC gets beat by Utah. I called that one with me and Matt on Thursday. Just a little brag there that I got that pick right with Utah. A tremendous job, with Utah and what they do. And talking about tough quarterback, Cam Rising, there's not many quarterbacks in college football. In football in general, that's tougher than Cam Rising. So that all happened. And then, of course, Ohio State, they're the biggest, obviously, they're in the playoff. They're the biggest benefactor of that. But I kind of wondered what would have to happen for Alabama to get in this thing. Because 2 losses, but with a TCU and a USC loss, put them in. But then you start looking at resumes. Alabama does have the 2 losses. And then you see Nick Saban go on Fox. He went on SportsCenter. I mean, Nick Saban was in full politic mode going into Sunday, going on shows, going on different TV networks, going whoever listened to him, the politics for Alabama. Kind of interesting. His big selling point was that Alabama would be favored against teams. Now, which teams would they be favored against? They wouldn't be favored against Georgia. Georgia would be favored in that one. Would they be favored against Michigan? They probably would, barely, just because the SEC side of things. Now, I do believe they would be favored against TCU, and they would be favored against Ohio State. But my whole thing, too, is this. If I'm a Tennessee person, a Tennessee fan, I'm kind of griping about this a little bit. Because they were 10-2. We beat Alabama, too. I mean, I know, but everybody's going to come back at me about that, though. Yeah, but Alabama only lost by 4 total points. And then you look at Tennessee, and they lost by 2 touchdowns against Georgia, and you lose 63-38 South Carolina. South Carolina screwed this up for 2 teams. They screwed up for Tennessee because Tennessee beat South Carolina. We're not only talking about Ohio State, or we may not even talking about TCU. That's an intriguing thing here. Tennessee gets in. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Tennessee's in. But at the same time, you look at Clemson. Had they not got upset by South Carolina, they would be in. And then you got Cade Klubnik, what he did, over 300 total yards after they benched DJ there in the ACC championship game where Clemson won 39-10. So you look at Clemson, what could they have done with Cade? But they should have went to him a lot earlier than they did. Oh, that'd be something we could talk about here in the offseason. And DJ is in the transfer portal. We'll get into some transfer portal quarterbacks. I just want to go look through the list of the names that are in there currently as we are recording this show. But South Carolina is the ultimate spoiler this year. They are the spoiler team for the college football playoff this year. But when it comes to, and I'm kind of throwing a lot out there for you right now, a lot of stuff out there, a lot of different kind of talking points. Alabama did not deserve to be in here. Look, and I know what people are going to say. Well, Ohio State, the last time they got beat bad against Michigan. And while the final score does say 45-23, that game was close going to the fourth quarter. Things just went wrong with Ohio State. Now, Michigan outplayed them for a second in a row. Michigan was the more physical football team. Michigan leaned on them in the second half. And there's no doubt about that. And that's kind of one thing I worry for Ohio State when you play Georgia, that's going to happen again. Because if you thought Michigan was physical, the Georgia Bulldogs are even more physical. And I kind of feel like the same thing with Michigan and TCU. I'm not officially picking these games yet. Probably do that next week. On the show, as we'll probably do a big bowl preview, and I'll give my semifinal predictions there. Not going to do that on this episode. But when you look at everything, Georgia, Michigan, that's easy, 1 and 2. TCU, kind of surprised they didn't fall to 3. You kind of wonder, was that because they didn't want to match Ohio State, Michigan up in the semifinal, or just how they really truly rank them? And then Ohio State 1 loss. I mean, that's the big thing here with Alabama. And we look at Alabama, they weren't overly impressive in any win. Probably their best win of the years against Ole Miss, maybe Texas, but that was without Quinn Ewers. Both teams are 8-4. Your best wins are against 8-4 teams. Now, when you look at Ohio State, if you're comparing those two to each other, Ohio State, yes, has a win against 8-4 Notre Dame, but then they have the big win over Penn State, who went 10-2 this year. By the way, looking forward to the Rose Bowl between Penn State and Utah. I think it's going to be a really, really fun football game. And I don't think there's going to be too many players in that one that are going to be opting out and not playing it. I think the Rose Bowl is going to be pretty fun this year. But I think the committee got it right with what they had. This really could have been a year we could have went back to the BCS. But anyways, I think the committee got it right with what they were presented with this scenario, with these teams. And it should be interesting. I feel like Georgia's going to be the overall favorite in any matchup. Of course, they are favored against Ohio State. And then whether they play Michigan or TCU in the championship game, they'll be favored there. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting build-up. It should be a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to jump into my conversation with Coach Max Howell. Now, later in the show, I will talk about the Heisman Trophy finalists are being announced. But we kind of got in that when we were talking about Georgia Stetson Bennett. When we recorded that, or at least from my side of things here on the show, I had not seen the list. I think it was already out, but I hadn't seen the list. So that's why we don't say that Stetson Bennett is a Heisman finalist. We just didn't know, so his name gets mentioned. You'll hear it. You'll understand what I'm talking about when we get to that. So me and Coach Howell, we're going to give his takeaways. We'll talk about the SEC championship game. We will talk about the college football playoff setup. But here is Coach Max Howell. All right, everybody, joining me on the show today as he does every single Tuesday. This is the last one of our weekly installments that we've been doing here this season. But I am joined by Coach Max Howell, Troy Sports Hall of Famer, former Florida State and Ole Miss assistant coach of 25-plus years on Sports Talk Radio. And Coach Howell, we're here. We know who's playing in the Final Four. We've got a bowl game set. We've got an SEC champ. It's the regular season is now in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, we were just talking just a moment ago, Philip. It seemed like just yesterday. It was in August, and we will keep waiting to the first ball game starts, and here it is, the end of the season already. I don't know where the last 12, 14 weeks went. I mean, it's just like a blur to me this time of year. So, but anyway, it's all over, and the Final Four is chosen, and we'll get a chance to see a few more pretty good football games, I think.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you get to that final rankings, just championship weekend as a whole. And you're right, the college football season, it just flies by. I mean, it's 14 weeks. It's not like the NFL where they're playing 18 weeks and then the 4 or 5 more weeks in playoffs, where it really is, where they're still going right now, and it's just feel like that they're not even close to their season ending. But it is kind of bittersweet when we get that last weekend. And obviously, this was championship weekend as well. Just as I always do when I bring you on, just what were some of your big takeaways from the weekend with all the championship games?
Well, probably no surprise that LSU going into Atlanta to play Georgia. I watched that game very closely, and I thought they'd win like this. A couple of things, though, I took away from it. One, I don't believe Georgia threw a pass in the fourth quarter. They had the game so under control. They ran the football at will, practically maintained what they had to do. I think probably, though, there was one shot. If I could, I know Claude Felton really well, who's the SID at Georgia. If I could get him to cut that one frame out for me and blow it up for a hard copy for my wall, I'd love it. That's when number 88, the Carter, the nose tackle, the 6'6", 380-pounder, had the quarterback under his arm. He grabbed LSU's quarterback and put him under his arm like a loaf of bread. But it's good, and I think Coach Kelly addressed not that particular case, but what he addressed was the fact is his team needs to be bigger, stronger, faster if they can compete in the SEC. He got a shot in this conference, and probably the best it is in the nation. But they couldn't block that defensive front. LSU could. The quarterback had to run for his life, and he was limping. Toward the end of the ball game. So. That was one thing, and I watched a little bit of the Clemson ball game, North Carolina. They made that quarterback change and went ahead and put the freshman in after the late part of the first quarter, I guess. And he's the guy, and I just saw recently where I have a hard time with his name. I call him Ukulele, but I think he's going I think he's already gone into the portal to transfer out. He knows he's not going to play Clemson anymore. So that game was also, but something much like as Alabama and Clemson, neither one of those made the playoffs. That's the first time, I guess, since the playoffs started that one or both were not in the playoffs. But there's something missing there. The finite execution that Clemson's had before. The defensive front's supposed to be the best in the country, and I didn't see too much of that the other night. Just some points there that Dabo Swinney's going to have to kind of readjust his recruiting, it looks like, because they aren't getting to be the best players right now. So those were the big things. And, of course, I was in South Carolina before I did our show last week and had a chance to watch and talk to a lot of South Carolina people. They had 2 great wins at the end of the year. They was extremely just jubilant in Columbia when I was there. Everybody on the streets were just talking about the team. Really pleased with their draw for the bowl game. And as we get later in the show tonight, I'll talk a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, really. And you look at South Carolina; they are the ultimate spoilers of the college football playoff because they're the reason why Tennessee's not in the 14 playoff. And look, with everything that shook out, if Clemson would have beat South Carolina the week before, they're probably in the playoffs. So you can look it over at Shane Beamer. He messed up a lot of in the Gamecocks. They messed up a lot of stuff for a lot of people when it comes to the playoff.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. And hats off to him. And I loved his interview last night in the selection committee yesterday afternoon. He said the first thing they did, they came straight off that field and hit the road recruiting. He knows that's the whole key to it. And I think he's, if you notice, so I didn't see his name when those job openings came out. I'm pretty close to the Auburn situation. His name never surfaced there, which I thought it would have. And there were a couple other jobs out there that came open that I thought maybe he might be at least mentioned, but he wasn't. So he must, have put the word out that he's pretty solid, pretty stable there, and he's not interested in moving anywhere.
Yeah, well, I know you more connected with what I am. Talking about Auburn situation, I felt like it was either going to be Lane or Hugh, and that was pretty much where that that list went for them.
Yep. Well, I think in all fairness, now that the dust is settled, I think Lane just used that basically to get him another raise. I mean, it sure appears that way. And who knows if his connections at Alabama said that if you go to Auburn, you'll never come back here as a coach. And I don't know that that's his aspirations, but probably is somewhere down the road whenever Coach Saban gets ready to take it to the house. And I'm sure he thought about it since the last ball game of this season being over. And now I'm seeing, I think there's already 9 hit the portals from up there this weekend. So I think we're going to see a different football team with the opt-outs that'll probably happen. I don't know about Will Anderson, Bryce Young. They both are finished, and I've already heard Bryce Young's probably not going to play. And if that's the case, Alabama's going to be favored against Kansas State. I don't think any of that. I watched them play in that ball game against TCU and was not that impressed, to be honest with either one of those teams. Not at the national championship level. Certainly they played well enough TCU did on the field. But, there's several things we'll get in that selection committee. I've got some really hard thoughts about that as well.
Before jumping that, just, because we do this, and we mostly look back at the SEC championship game, of course, and you brought up some stuff in there. Yeah, that Jalen Carter, when he picked up Jaden Daniels, that was, that's one of them shots you're going to see for a very long time. I think that's going to be one of them things when they show, SEC championship games in the future when they're showing highlights and stuff, kind of hyping up the game. I think you're going to see that one quite often. You may see it a lot going into the playoff games, but that first half, and I'll ask you this too about LSU, because Jaden Daniels, I actually think he played pretty well, throwing the ball early. LSU had some things go against them. Of course, apparently LSU did not know you can return a block field goal back. That would hurt them. And then just a bad luck. Yep. I mean, it's just bad luck. I'm not a big bad luck, good luck guy, but when the ball bounces off somebody's head, tips off another Georgia player, and the other guy intercepts it,
right.
this is not your day. That was just a sign. But
No.
but with LSU though, with Jaden Daniels, the ankle injury, obviously a big part of his game and LSU's offense with him is his running ability. Just how much do you think that hampered them just from a running the ball standpoint against Georgia? It's hard to run against Georgia, I know, but just how much do you think did you see that really hampered their offense with him not being able to be the mobile quarterback that he usually is?
I think it hampered it a lot because they couldn't run up the middle, period. Their only hope is to get outside, and that's where he's so effective. Play action stuff and run the football as opposed to trying to get on the corner and make a decision or make the strong safety come over. Those are the things that he causes with the defense, and he certainly couldn't do that, in particular the second half. So that's. But you know, but if you look at it, he's built not to be a running quarterback. I mean, he's not big. He's frail looking. I mean, what, he's 6'1" or 2, 180 pounds. Mm-hmm. I think those days of that kind of quarterback, and Bryce Young is an exception. I don't think there's any doubt. But Bill Rhodes, the number 2, he's a prototype. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, runs a 4.4. That to me is a prototype of the coming quarterback for the offenses that are out there today. And the big, strong kids that can take a beating, I think they're the ones that get a chance to last, and I think that's what eventually end up in the NFL.
Yeah, and just still with the passing game from LSU, and in the second half they went with Garrett Nussmeier, and I guess you're down as big as they were. It's just let's just throw caution to the wind. Let's just sling the ball all over the place because he come in and on the game he was 15 to 27. 294, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And overall, Georgia did give up over 500 yards. So while as well as Georgia played, they were dominant. There really was, you never felt like that game was any doubt. Are you concerned with Georgia about that? With they giving up so many passing yards?
They'll change everything. You can't tell me, as thorough as they are at that level in preparation, that they worried about LSU. I guarantee you they are. They knew. And down the road, they were probably going to play Ohio State or Michigan. I know Ohio State was a question mark about it, but they prepared both. They're prepared were prepared for both of those teams. Now they know. They open up with with Ohio State, and they're going to play. They'll beat them, and then they'll play Michigan for the championship. I'd almost in fact, that's all the gamblers in Las Vegas are saying now. That's the way it's going to be. But if you look at it based on trends and based on this year's records and all, that's the way I think that's the way it comes. But I don't giving up 500 yards. So what? How many points they give up? They gave up 30 points. And how many they scored? They scored 50 and could have scored 20 more. If you watch that game closely, they didn't throw the football. They did nothing but run the ball inside, tackle to tackle almost the whole quarter. The fourth quarter, they made no effort to try to add more points to it. So the 500 yards they gave up to me that's just numbers on the paper. It had no relevance to the win or losing that football game.
Yeah, I think I did see Kirby Smart. I'm sure he's going to use it though. He's going to use it for some get some adjustment going into these games. Stetson Bennett, I don't really think we've talked a lot about him when I've had you on during these weeks breaking down these games, looking back at the weeks. And he had another. I mean, he really comes to play in these big games. I mean, even last year when they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, I know he threw a couple interceptions, but he played pretty well. He actually did everything he could to keep them in the game because Bryce Young could not miss that day. But on Saturday, he was 23 of 29, 274, and 4 touchdowns. And obviously, you look at him. I mean, he's not a big guy. You talked about that with Jaden Daniels. He doesn't look like the prototype pro quarterback, and they've wanted to replace him, I think, for the whole time he's been at Georgia's quarterback. What do you see, from the coaching standpoint with Stetson Bennett that makes him so successful for the Georgia Bulldogs?
He can read defenses, that's first and foremost, and he's quick. His feet's quick, and he thinks quick, and he's 25 years old. Let's go move up, talk about the maturity level. I mean, he's been the starting quarterback there for a couple of years now. And remember, he's played at almost every level, walked on to junior college. We go through all the, times. I think he played college football about 6 or 7 years. So that he's older. I think I did not see he's older than 11 of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
He's older than Joe Burrow.
Yeah. Well, he's that maturity thing means a lot. I mean, when a guy is confident and knows he's a half a step faster on the design plays, he get outside. And you remember that's where he did a lot of his rollout stuff. He'd get caught or flushed out of the pocket, and he'd roll out. And he could move around the back there. He wouldn't. The only time you ever saw him run, maybe occasionally get on the corner for a first down. I mean, you don't ever see him run a quarterback draw, per se. He would run it, but because of his physical structure, Kirby didn't want to get him hurt, and I don't blame him. But I think a lot of that is confidence. He knew what the offense did, and he knew he was quicker than most of those linemen that were coming in there. And he could read the defense. He knew where the secondary was going to be, and he knew where wide receiver was going to be. And it paid off for him. Recruited and brought in there just never panned out. They weren't, they didn't have the mental or physical tools that Bennett had. And I know people say, well, why he's not up for the Heisman? Well, the voters, 960 voters that vote for the Heisman, and a lot of those folks don't even see the ball game. And if they do, they don't. A lot of the writers are my age or older, and they don't really work full time anymore. I got a lot of I guess thoughts about how the voting goes for that. But he's never been mentioned for the Heisman, and that's probably the first time in a long time I remember when the quarterback of the national championship team at least it got an invite to New York for the ceremonies, but have not seen Bennett invited yet.
Yeah, and he just is tremendous with him. I mean, like I said, and he doesn't lose games. He doesn't put them in bad position. It'll be interesting, going into this. And like I said, 25 years old. He's older than, like you said, most NFL quarterbacks. And and you cannot replace experience. That's one thing. You can replace talent, but you cannot replace experience. And there's nothing he hasn't seen. I mean, he's been a lot in his time at Georgia.
Very true.
He's been there as long as Kirby has been there. I guess that's the that's the thing there. The playoff rankings, I guess, really, if you just watched and saw everything on Saturday, just no surprising that these four were here. Alabama, Nick Saban was politicking hard to get in there on Saturday night. I was watching a little bit of the Big Ten championship game, and I said, "Whoop, there's Nick Saban coming up." So, I said, "Okay, he's in politic. He's in politic mode," which you see Coach do. Anything with the four teams that were selected by the committee?
Here's what I took away from that. There'll never be a two-loss team in the playoffs. If it had been, Alabama would have been there. So that's the one thing committee. They never said that, but it's obvious. And then the other thing I took away, when they had I don't recall the guy's name, the head of the committee, it was interviewed during that session. He said, in the Alabama quality wins, they weren't substantial enough. You know what that means? That means the next time I took a team out and go play somebody, I'm going to run the score up on them. Because they didn't beat Texas but 1 point, and they scraped by on Texas A&M. And A&M, they were making reference to that when A&M was number 6 in the nation at the beginning of the season. But that was the two teams, he said, when Alabama took their team to Texas. You go back and pull it. I don't know where you record that or not, but you go back and pull it. He said when the two quality wins that they thought, and then he said that they really didn't handle Mississippi State either. That was another one they talked about. You know what that tells me? That tells me that this thing about sportsmanship, and when you get ahead, you got the game under control. You run your base offense. You don't try to throw one down the field or whatever. Well, evidently the committee doesn't take that into consideration anymore. So if I'm the coach for next year, I listen to that. I play it back what he said, and I guarantee you I'm going out there to win it. If I lose, I'm going to shoot not to have but one loss on my record. But the wins are going to be my 1s and 2s are going to play the whole ball game. 3s and 4s can get practice time. That's what I took away from it, and because I think that's the reason Alabama didn't get in.
And you look at the matchups too, and you're right. And I guess the thing too, with it as well, moving forward, a couple of years, Alabama would be in. When we get to 12, they will be in. And I don't think I've really asked you about that. What are your feelings on the 2 years? They will be at 12. Expanding the playoff past 12. I know a lot of people. I feel like there's a mixed camp on that. It's like one side is looking forward to it. More teams get involved. More good matchups. It won't be like the bowl games. Players opting out. Players will play in the playoff games. But the other side, I know people are concerned that it's going to devalue the regular season because college football at this point they do have the best regular season in all sports. Where do you sit on that?
Well, let me tell you, that last statement you made is a stupid statement. Not from you, but from the people that feel that way, Philip. You got to win every game to get there. First of all, how can the season not be relevant each ball game? Because if you lose, you're out. I'm all for it. I'll be honest with you. And another thing, because of the money situation, the top 4 teams are going to get a bye probably, and they're going to play on campus for the remaining teams, for the teams with the best record. So I love that. That's a more equitable way to spread the money around. More teams that are struggling financially will end up, trying to getting a bigger paycheck for it for the playoffs. And as you pointed out, also the kids will play. It's not like a bowl game where they have a chance to opt out. They're going to have to play all the games because they're still on scholarship. So, see, that's another whole story within itself, how these kids get a chance to opt out. Remember, the scholarships are only 1 year at a time, and they're all designed to be in at the end of the regular season. The bowl game is optional. None of them have to play if they don't want to. They aren't even on scholarships anymore. The new scholarship doesn't start to the next semester. So, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff when it comes to the legalities of players and coaches' salaries as well, that a lot of the fans have no clue about.
Yeah, and I'm pro expansion because, one, I think it's a great way to grow the sport because while we're in the Southeast, we believe and we love the SEC. It's the best conference out there, best football. I do believe the sport needs some more West Coast involvement in the postseason. And look, it's just not happening with the Pac-12. USC had their chance this past Friday. If they would have won, they're more likely in the playoff. But I also think, like you said, get more teams involved, get more portions of the country involved. I think that actually does help the sport and game even more attention throughout the whole country, not just in the Southeast and a little bit of the Midwest and on the East Coast, which it kind of has felt like where the sport has been over the years.
Well, it's because of the interest of the university. It doesn't matter what the rules are going to say. It's up to the university if they decide that, look, Deion Sanders just takes the Colorado job. I don't know where you looked at the record. Colorado's had one winning season in 17 years. Mm-hmm. They are a major university, but they lead with the education philosophy a lot more liberal than the schools in this part of the country do, and consequently the administration of those schools don't think that athletics is a major part of the school. And here's a story I always love to tell when people start that with me, is that walk down the street. Let's just take, of course, Alabama's there. Let's just go to Florida. Go to Tallahassee, walk down the street, and ask them who the president of University of Florida is. Not 1 out of 10 might know. Ask them who the head football coach is. 9 out of 10 will know. And that holds true anywhere in this part of the country. You go to Oregon or you go to Washington State, you can ask them who the president, they don't know. You can ask them who the coach, they don't know that either because they don't take it. The fan base doesn't take it that seriously. So I know what you're talking about, and on paper, the equality of having more schools involved, but that's their decision. They've made those decisions about their athletic programs and other programs they have at the university level. And, hey, so be it. Play with what you got. And that's what we got. That's why it's too big. It's two major conferences right now, the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think everybody else eventually will end up in one. And we'll have 3 major conferences. And they'll pull out and form their own NCAA governing body. It won't be anything like it is today.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that is where we're headed, especially with the TV contracts with both conferences there, with SEC, with ESPN and ABC, and then the Big Ten, obviously, with CBS, NBC, and Fox. And I do believe, too, as well, that when when the Big Ten made their move, getting USC and UCLA, of course, the year before, Texas and Oklahoma announced they were eventually becoming to the SEC. There was these other conferences that felt like they were hesitant to agree to the expanded playoff. But then I feel like they saw that happen and said, oh, we better go ahead and accept this because we're involved with this. If we do not, we're really going to be left behind. We're talking about the Pac, I guess it'll be the Pac-10 now. Go back to that, the Big 12 in the ACC and Notre Dame. Of course, they looked at this, okay, these two are forming something really, really big. They're almost looking like they could be the AFC and the NFC of college football, two conferences like we have in the National Football League. And then let's not get behind. Let's jump on this thing. So, like I said, and I've said this 2 or 3 times, this one statement, not falling behind the SEC and the Big Ten.
Well, I'm going to say this to you now. If Notre Dame doesn't join the ACC is going to fall apart as well. Because I pretty well know that the next 4 teams SEC is going after as part of the ACC. They want the TV market up the East Coast. So they'll go to North Carolina, Virginia, maybe NC State. I don't think they'll take Miami or FSU because they've already got Florida. So I think that's where, and I do believe they're going from 16 to 20 over the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with that. It gives us plenty to talk about in the offseason. That's why I tell people, say, you think college football, the conversation's over when the season's over? No, it gets even more interesting then. Especially now with transfer portal, recruiting, everything else. I mean, I tell people all the time, and obviously you know this from your days, doing this every day on the radio. College football, there were lulls in the calendar where there's not really much going on. There's really not a point in the calendar, maybe a little bit, in the month of May and June, maybe a little bit, but there's really not a point in the calendar now where there's nothing going on in college football.
Very true. Very, very true. And that's probably the worst, the downtime, if there is. It may leave maybe as far as the first week of June. But after that, when the coaches and all come back, if they get a week or 2 off, when they come back, it's full speed after that. And of course, laying up, preparing for that, you still got, what about the academics? And with May being finals at most every university, then how many of the kids end up with academic problems? Who's coming back? Who flunked out? I mean, you're right. There's something to talk about the year round now.
Yeah, there is no off season now. There's just because there may not be games, but there's not an off season. We finish up here. We mentioned the matchups, how the rankings would. Of course, it'll be TCU playing Michigan, and it will be Ohio State playing Georgia. And I'd love to get what you think about these two matchups and who you see really winning it all. It just really feels like with Michigan versus TCU and Georgia versus Ohio State, the favorites in these games obviously are Michigan, Georgia. I just feel like they're more physical than the team they're playing, and that's going to be the big difference out of anything. But with both these matchups, what catches your eye, and then just who you think is going to win the whole thing?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt. Georgia's going to win it all. I'll start with that. They got the best team. I'll say this: it'll be Georgia's to lose. You can't never tell. Michigan impressed me tremendously over last year, and I think they'll handle TCU like they don't show up probably. Look, we went through this thing with Cincinnati last year. And TCU, they won, and I understand, the committee, I don't see how the committee could look at quality wins, particularly with 2 openings at the end, with Southern Cal getting beat, particularly in Tennessee as well, by South Carolina. So I was surprised that they kept, but it seemed like the committee wants that smaller school to stay in there. But think about this. I went back and looked at some numbers, and I'm just talking a little bit about why Alabama versus TCU. And I know the record is 2 losses versus 1. But the fact is, if it's all about not sections of the country, but eyes watching the playoffs, when Alabama plays on any given Saturday, the Arbitron ratings guesstimate there's 4.5 billion people watching that ball game, or whoever they play. when TCU plays, it's not even a million. Why, it's about 800,000. So if the TV ratings are so high because of the teams that they play, because that's what the value of the spots they sell on, which is in turn the money that goes back to the schools come from. Why didn't they take a school like Alabama as opposed to TCU? So I just use it. And the same thing held true for Cincinnati last year. Well, for where they are, but their coach wrote it out one more year. He goes to Wisconsin this year. So anyway, I have some hard feelings about some of the ways that they go about looking at the selection per se. But to answer your question, I think Michigan steamrolls over TCU. Georgia wins big over Ohio State. And of course, those two will play. And I like Georgia. Georgia will be a 7 to 8 point favorite in that ball game. So it opened up at 7.5 over Ohio State. They'll win by 14, I believe, at least. And then Michigan, I think, will win by 20 against TCU.
Yeah, I feel like, if we get that Georgia-Michigan matchup, that is going to be – I mean, Georgia obviously got to give the advantage point just because defending champion, just a more talented team. But that's going to be one physical football game between those two when they get together.
Absolutely. I like Michigan's run game. I do. They line up and want to run straight. That's where Georgia excels in the run game. Now, as you pointed out earlier in the show tonight, the fact is, with Georgia giving up over 500 yards, the passing game may come into play with against Michigan, and I know it's going to come into play against Ohio State. They got 2 or 3 of the best wide receivers in the country. So, but the fact is, what about the offensive front? At the quarterback stand at halftime to throw the football. That's where they go. That's where Georgia's defense, I think, will come to fruition. And the fact is that the imagination of where the blitz is going to come from. Is it a corner? Is it 2 linebackers? Is it a safety up the middle? Where does it come from? That's going to cause Ohio State, I think, a lot of problems because they've never seen that in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they haven't, and they haven't seen Brock Bowers either. So that's going to be another thing to deal with him. All of them, Ohio State, and if they play Michigan, you're going to find out what Brock Bowers. Well, they did see Brock. Let me rephrase that. They do know Brock Bowers. Michigan does because they played last year in the semifinals. Let me correct myself before somebody on the internet jumps all over me for saying that. And then lastly, before we get out here, of course, you mentioned South Carolina's bowl game was that's intriguing. Both teams are 8-4. They'll play Notre Dame on the 30th in the Gator Bowl. A lot of interesting matchups, with SEC and just overall the bowl season. Just anything out there stand out to you that you're really looking forward to seeing as we head into bowl season?
Well, Mississippi State in Illinois. Brett Bielema was at Illinois. It was at Arkansas. Isn't it funny how down here he could hardly get a break-even season, goes to Illinois and takes him to 8-4 the second year he's there. And I think because he'll know Mississippi State. Remember, he had to play Mississippi State the years he was at Arkansas, so he'll understand what how basically how Mike Leach runs his offense. I think that's going to be I have not seen the lines on that yet, but I think that's a kind of an intriguing game. LSU and Purdue, to me, that's going to be like watching paint dry, particularly for quarterback at LSU that play. If he gets hurt, I don't know where you watch Purdue in their last ball game of the season, not, but they run up down the field well, but had a hard time getting in the end zone. I made a statement the other day. They said, "Well, pick the score." I said 8-6. It's what that'll be because both of them can move the football, but against each other, Purdue's defensive front's pretty good now. I think LSU will have as hard a time scoring against Purdue as they did against Georgia. So I think that's going to be kind of an intriguing game. I'm interested to see how Kelly's going to take this football team because he won more games than I thought they could the first year. 9-4. So taking that, how far does he go forward in trying to rebuild this program since he's kind of got a leg up as far as the expectation from the fan base?
Yeah, that's a very intriguing match. Yeah, I was watching some of that game. I was like, Purdue, just go for it on fourth down once. I mean, you're not going to beat Michigan kicking field goals. I mean, good gracious. You're the underdog. I mean, you have nothing to lose in this situation. You just go for a couple of them. Especially when you got a quarterback as your head coach. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting bowl season. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have to suffer through this Saturday. Only have an Army and Navy, but we'll get going the next Friday with some bowl games. And Coach, I just want to say I appreciate you doing this once again. I appreciate you coming on every week after these games, recapping and breaking them down. Speaking as somebody that was a big fan of yours when you was on the radio, I've told you before I was a listener when you were doing Maxed Out. So it's just an honor to me to have you on. Of course, I'll have we'll be talking throughout the all season and back next season, I'm sure. But I appreciate you doing this, and I'll look forward to when we get together again.
Philip, it's always my pleasure. It's really fun to me. I get a chance to. I don't do a full-time show anytime. I do a lot of guest appearances during football season. That's about the only time I do. But this has been a real happy for me, and I want to thank you for that opportunity.
Oh yeah, anytime, Coach. I always appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
We'll do it soon. Thank you.
And once again, thanks to Coach Max Howell. Thanks for Coach for coming on every Tuesday here on the pod. It's been great having him on. As I said, there's somebody I look up to. I remember listening to him as an 18-year-old in my car, in my truck, between classes when I first got out of high school, going to a local college here in Dothan. So I always enjoy hearing Coach Howell talk about college football, SEC football, his insight. So I always appreciate him doing that. So, as I said, going into that, probably while we were talking, the finalists were released. Of course, you heard the comments there. Stetson Bennett has not been mentioned in the Heisman. Well, how about this? Stetson Bennett is a Heisman Trophy finalist. They announced the four guys. Stetson Bennett, Georgia quarterback, Max Duggan, TCU quarterback, C.J. Stroud, Ohio State quarterback, and Caleb Williams, USC quarterback. So when I look at this list, now, obviously, there is much discussion as soon as this comes out about Stetson Bennett, about him being a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. And look, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this in a negative way. Some people may take it that way, but I do not mean this in the negative. I mean this in the positive, and I apologize if I come across negative. But with Stetson Bennett, this feels like a career achievement award. Like he's being honored for what he's done in his career at Georgia. Because you look at his numbers, 68% completion percentage, 3,425 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 7 rushing touchdowns on the year, 27 total touchdowns. Those are good numbers. And Stetson Bennett's had a tremendous year. Tremendous career at Georgia. Very well could win 2 national championships. Not many quarterbacks can say they've done that. But obviously, when you look at the numbers of a Hendon Hooker, a Blake Corum, even a Bryce Young, it's not the same. And I felt like, if you invited Bryce Young, I think it was just because he won it last year. Blake Corum, running back, a tremendous season for him. Sucks what happened to him in the year. And then Hendon Hooker, his numbers yardage-wise are not as good. I think he's like 300 yards behind Bennett. Of course, he got hurt against South Carolina a couple weeks ago, ended his season. More touchdowns. He's in the 30 range there. I would have liked to seen Hendon Hooker be invited to this. I think he deserved it. He had the season to warrant it. But they went with Stetson Bennett with the 4th spot here. Like I said, feels like a career achievement award, which I think is great. I'm happy to see Stetson Bennett going to be there. We all know he's not going to win the award. It's going to be one of the other 3 quarterbacks. But still, him being there, it's caused some people to, really, some criticism that he's there, not Hendon Hooker, particularly from the Tennessee side of things. Now, you look at the other 3 quarterbacks, Max Duggan, I can give you his numbers. 65% completion percentage, 3,321 yards, 30 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. He has 6 rushing touchdowns on the year with 404 rushing yards. Well, Max Duggan's not about the yardage or the stats. It's about his grit. He really is, when you watch TCU play the heart and soul of that team. They go as he goes. He wills this team to victory in so many close games and almost in the Big 12 championship game. C.J. Stroud's the next line of NFL guy. This is a guy that you look at as a top 10 pick, top 5 pick in NFL draft. And then there's Caleb Williams, had a tremendous year for USC. Look, they were up 17-3 early on Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. And I believe this. If he doesn't get hurt, they probably win that game because Utah couldn't stop them before the injury. 66% completion percentage, 4,075 yards, 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 10 rushing touchdowns on the year. So if I'm going to rank these players, I'm going to go with Caleb Williams as my pick to win the Heisman Trophy. I think C.J. Stroud will finish second, but I think him and Duggan will be close for second. I could see that, and then I think Stetson Bennett finish fourth, and we'll see the other players who come in next up in that with the Heisman Trophy. It's going to be interesting because while I say Caleb Williams, I'm not 100% sold on it. So it could be a surprising and a little question and intrigue around the Heisman Trophy. Now on Monday was looked at as Portal Monday. Big day. A lot of players entered transfer portal. Over 500 players beginning the 45-day window for players to go into the transfer portal. New way NCAA doing it. I think this is the best way. Have it more contained. Of course, they'll be able to do it again. There's a 15-day window after spring practice. But looking at some of the quarterbacks, that's what we're always interested in. Where's quarterbacks? What are they doing? A lot of good quarterbacks are sitting in the portal right now. A lot of interesting names, too, as well. One that caught me off guard, of course, I remember watching play against Auburn this year, and I caught a couple games with Western Kentucky, too, this season as well. Austin Reed, he has entered the portal. He hails from Florida, just throwing it out there for the next segment. This year he has thrown 4,247 yards, second in the country, and also second in the country with 36 touchdown passes. Of course, he transferred from West Florida out of Division II. Really good quarterback. Western Kentucky plays a very up-tempo, spread offense, NASCAR-style pace. Gets the ball out quick, but he really can push the ball down the field. He's an interesting player that I think he could, if he went to the right Power 5 school, I think he needs to be kind of in the same offense that what Western Kentucky run, up-tempo, fast. He's not a mobile quarterback. He's a pocket passer, really just a pure passer. So fit in the right offense, he could be a really good one, especially if it's more of an air raid style offense. Of course, we talked about this guy a little bit with Coach Max Howell. DJ over at Clemson, he entered the portal. Look, it's obvious Cade Klubnik's going to be the guy moving forward for them. That decision was made in the ACC Championship game. I said in the open that I think that decision should have been made earlier in the year. It's just like he knows this was going to be it for him. There have been talk, though, during the year that he could hit the portal regardless, just, because of Cade Klubnik. Zach Calzada, Auburn quarterback, of course, he transferred from Texas A&M. He jumps back into the portal. Very interesting with him. I thought I saw some stuff where he would probably come back to Auburn and compete with Robbie Ashford for the starting quarterback job. But maybe he has been told some things by Hugh Freeze. Who knows? But he has entered the portal. Keaton Slovis is in the portal once again. Pitt quarterback for 1 year with Pitt after transferring from USC the year before. This 1 year with Pitt, he threw for 2,937 yards, 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Pitt, more of a defensive focused team. They are 8-4 on the year. Be kind of interesting where Keaton Slovis goes. Really looked like his future was bright there at USC. Struggled his second year starter and not a great year there with Pitt either. Didn't really put him over top. Of course, he was replacing Kenny Pickett there. Malik Hornsby out of Arkansas entered the portal. This is the quarterback. Look, with KJ Jefferson coming back, obviously he's probably looking, okay, I'm not going to be started here. With Hornsby, I think he would fit better in an offense that is going to focus on the quarterback run game more. He is very underdeveloped as a passer, very inconsistent. He's not always super accurate, very athletic, can make some plays with his legs, and has a good arm. Just the pure passer part of his game is not developed yet. I could see him as a good group of 5 quarterback for somebody that could really make some plays with his legs. Mike Wright, talking about mobile quarterbacks, Vanderbilt quarterback, he entered the portal. He swapped out time with A.J. Swan this year. I really felt like Vanderbilt played better with Mike Wright toward the end of the year when they got the big wins over Kentucky and Florida to get to 5-7 on the season. Kind of interesting that he would jump in, but then you got A.J. Swan there, the back and forth with those two. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see where Mike Wright lands. I think he's kind of like with Hornsby. I would think he would be if he wants to start. You're not going to stay at Vanderbilt and fight with Swan for the job. I would think he would be better fit at a group of 5 school. That would kind of be my thought with him. The big name, kind of a shocker, surprised me to see this name. Devin Leary, North Carolina State quarterback, preseason ACC Player of the Year, torn pectoral muscle, 5th game of the year, so he missed a big chunk of the year. North Carolina State played 4 different quarterbacks this season. Of course, they have Ben Finley and MJ Morris, who were really successful. They played well. Ben Finley played really well against North Carolina in the season finale for them. For Devin Leary, whoever gets him, they're getting a really good quarterback. 62 touchdowns, 35 in 2021. You would think he would be a highly coveted player for a lot of big programs, ones that are going to need a quarterback next year. One could be Alabama. I don't think Milroe is the guy there for them. He's a mobile quarterback. He's got a strong arm, not accurate. If they want to continue with a more pass-heavy offense that Alabama's been playing, the two-a-days with Matt Jones and now with Bryce Young, I think Devin Leary would be a good fit there. And, of course, you look at a team like Georgia, maybe them. I know they got some 5-stars sitting behind Stetson Bennett, so we'll see. We'll see with that, but that would be a big pickup for them. Hudson Card, Texas, this just was obvious. This makes a lot of sense for him to want to leave the program because you've got Quinn Ewers there as the starter this year. I would think Ewers would probably start next year as a starter, and then you've got Arch Manning coming in. Hudson Card is just 3 quarterbacks. It's just going to be tough for him to get filled. He's a solid quarterback. He's not as good as Ewers. He played well at times last year and this year. Be interesting where he could go. He could land with a good Power 5 school, would get a solid quarterback with him. And then Drew Pine from Notre Dame. He came in for a injured Tyler Buckner. He went 8-2 as a starter, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 65% passer, 4-1 as a quarterback against top 25. That's another quarterback. He's played well. I think he fits a certain system. Notre Dame is more of a pro-style offense, I guess you would say. He probably would fit that mold better. Not an overly mobile quarterback. He's not a statue behind the offensive line. He can move. Not a great runner. A decent mobility there for him. So I think that would be a good pick. So all these quarterbacks, like I said, I didn't go through all the quarterbacks. There's tons of quarterbacks in the portal, but these are just some of the big names that stuck out to me. All right, so the previous segment, I talked about all those quarterbacks that are in the transfer portal. Florida might want to dive into there because they are going to need a quarterback. Anthony Richardson announced on Monday he would enter the NFL draft. Look, I don't think he should. I don't think he's ready. You're probably looking at a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, in my opinion. Super talented. Not many quarterbacks in college football have the athletic ability that Anthony Richardson has. He's a dynamic runner. He can be a really good passer, but the passing was very, very inconsistent, and that was a big reason why Florida went 6-6 on the year. He played great in a lot of games this season. The Utah game to open, he played really well against Tennessee, even though that was a loss. He did not play horrible against LSU. He didn't play horrible against Florida State. There were just some games where he just didn't show up. He didn't play well. Georgia, for some, he didn't run them a lot in the first half. They got down big. They rallied. They got within 1 score in that one because they started running him more. But I just don't think he's there. He's not consistent enough as a passer, not developed enough as a passer. And Florida's going to have really a tough deal in their bowl game, and they play in that opening weekend in the Las Vegas Bowl against Oregon State. Also, with the dismissal of Jalen Kitna from the team, you can go look up why he's not on the team. I'm not going to talk about that here. You can just go look that up. So they're going to have to play a quarterback that has not taken a snap or thrown a pass all year. So it's going to be tough going for Florida, but Florida is probably going to want to jump into that transfer portal now to find a quarterback. All right, now we're going to close out the show with your thoughts. Last week, of course, talked about a lot. 3 different podcasts I did last week talked about Auburn hiring Hugh Freeze. So I went to Facebook, I went to Twitter, and I wanted to get your responses from the Auburn fans, Auburn people, on what they thought about the Hugh Freeze hiring at Auburn. So that's what we're going to do now. I mean, you've heard my opinion on it. You heard Coach Mace Howell's opinion on it last week. We had Taylor Jones with Auburn Wire. You heard Matt Lowe talk about it. So get your thoughts. What you think about the Hugh Freeze hiring at Auburn, and try to do this more often. Just get your thoughts, get a little mailbag stuff going here at the end of the show, because we always want to talk college football. We always want to talk football here, especially in the Southeast. So we're going to jump into that right now with what you had to say about the hire. We'll start off Joshua Kirkland. I won't watch them again. It won't hurt them, I know, but Cadillac had heart and drive. He was for Auburn and not just a payday. He may not have had the experience, but his heart was pure and in the right place. As much money as Auburn has spent on buyouts, they could have had saving for a year at least. But that's the boosters for you. Ridiculous. Kenton Hamilton, it honestly baffles me. It's only a marginally better choice than Kiffin. A 6-year contract is too long to offer someone who hasn't coached in competitive conference in 6 years. When he did, he was an 8 to 10 win head coach at best. His record is similar to Chizik and Malzahn. It's another case of Auburn giving a top-class contract to a mediocre coach that they will likely terminate 2 or 3 years early and have to keep to paying out. Stop seeking out the big hire and promote guys with heart and youth. In this case, yes, Cadillac was my top choice, and it's guys like him that should be leading every team. Give me a guy with energy, passion for the school, and a heart for the players any day. Josh Peterson, the simple fact is this: Caddy is all Auburn, but the Iron Bowl showed his inexperience, kicking field goals when down multiple possessions. I'm glad he was retained so he can learn. I also hope the title associate head coach is added. Freeze is an innovative play caller that will get our playmakers in the best position to win. From a football-only standpoint, it's a great hire. Hopefully, he has learned his lesson about extracurricular activities. As I heard this morning, Ole Miss had already stood behind him regarding the recruiting violations with NIL. That shouldn't be a problem at Auburn. It was the personal transgressions that got him fired. I read that he has agreed to give all control over social media accounts, and I'm sure he has several more clauses in his contract. Now, if he stays on the straight and narrow, and I apologize, I have to find the rest of Josh's comment on that. This is, bear with me here on the podcast, everybody. Just a little behind the scenes. When I do that, I use a screenshot it. I read them off my phone, especially since we're audio only on this episode of the show. All right, so here we go. Continue what Josh had to say. Now, if he stays on the straight and narrow, recruits well, and brings us back to prominence, it will make all these negative Nancys eat their words. I agree with Josh on there, and I get the other sentiments by Cadillac too as well. I mean, what he did, energizing the fan base, was really phenomenal, what he did. So, I mean, I don't agree with it, but I also get why people do think that way. Ken Maddox, I'm pretty sure AU saved a ton of money and got a better fit, but I doubt he was a consensus pick among boosters, which means it'll be a short lease once again for a coach in the hardest division in college football. I think he will make AU competitive again and probably back to a top 10, 15 recruiting classes. But let him lose a game he shouldn't have, and there will be turmoil again. I keep my fingers crossed he's hungry for redemption. Robert Ramey, Personally, I'm good with it considering his collegiate background on winning in offensive line. He made mistakes, but who hasn't? He got caught making such mistakes and has paid his dues, in my opinion. Give him a chance because all the people bad-mouthing him right now will sing a different song when he's winning. And then William Reed, be fired in a year, roll tide. So we got some Alabama conversation in there as well. So I appreciate it. I appreciate all comments coming in here on the show. Always enjoy it when somebody does that. And you can keep them coming in. You can hit me up on Twitter at pjordansec, and you can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for today's edition of the Philip Jordan Show. Once again, thanks to Coach Max Howell for coming on. Great having him on every Tuesday throughout the season. We'll talk to Coach again in the future. That won't be the last time you'll hear from Coach. It'll be we'll talk to him probably throughout the off season, and hopefully we can do that again next season. Be back on Thursday. Be different though. Matt won't be with me. You guys are used to that, I'm sure. Matt Lowe will not be with me. Me and Matt may be doing something for the Bulls, though. We got to see if we can get that going. But anyways, special guest. One of my favorites will be on the show on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to that. I may try to put some more stuff on the Facebook pages and Twitter and all that good stuff to kind of get some more comments from you guys, and we can jump into that, jump into some more mailbag stuff, which we're probably going to do a lot of during the off season as well, since we won't have games to talk about. And I'm going to warn you when we get into the month of January. I know this is a predominantly college football show, but we will be previewing NFL playoff games when we get to that point. Just let you guys know about that ahead of time. So, but we good. We got a lot of stuff college football to keep up with. I'm sure there's going to be more transfer portal news and discussion to have on Thursday when I join you guys once again. And just other news going around. We'll have the Heisman Trophy, which I kind of gave my predictions for that. Army-Navy is this week, so we do have some football there. FCS playoffs are this weekend as well. So, no, we're done with the load of Saturdays of college football. We do have a few games to watch this weekend. And, of course, there's also the NFL. Love football. I'm all about football. Celebrate the game of football, especially college football. Remember, you can find a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Really appreciate if you do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube. Just a warning, everybody. As you could tell here, if you're still here, you're still listening on YouTube. Video was not really there. It's audio only this week on the show. We're only doing audio only. Be back with some video content next week. I promise on that. But anyways, if you are checking on YouTube, please leave a comment. Go to Philip Jordan Show YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button. Hit the bell for all notifications. And like I said, once again, leave a comment on the video. I'll read out future edition of the show. And I've got some YouTube comments I'm going to read on Thursday's show. Some recent comments on some videos. So we'll be doing that on Thursday as well. And as I said, you can, once again, you follow me on social media at pjordanscc, and also email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a great Tuesday. I'll talk to you Thursday. And you've been listening to the Philip Jordan Show.